So since I didn't know if you got the Aruch Shulchan or not, I decided I would do something different. So I will share my screen. All right. I will Yavniify the document.
If you're sharing it just for me, don't, because I'm looking at it on my other screen on my computer. Anyway,
I'm actually sharing it also for the sake of the recording. I thought that might be a good idea.
That's what I figured. Yeah.
All right. So just to give some background here, Rav Ovadia Yosef in this tshuva, and actually in the one that follows too, which we're not going to probably have time to look at. I didn't put it in the document. He's actually dealing with initially a question of what happens if I remember correctly, like the wedding, the ketubah was signed on, or maybe it's the kiddushin was done. Yeah, I think it was the ketubah was signed. That's what it was. The ketubah was signed during the day, and then the actual nisuin happens at night. Does that first night count for Sheva Brachot? Does it not count for Sheva? Is that day one? Is it day two? Like, how many Sheva Brachot days do you get? How many days of Mishteh do you get? That's what he's dealing with here. But he then says, well, before I deal with it, I have to figure out, well, when does Nisuin actually happen? What was the Nisuin? And that's where our topic comes into it. In the first half of his tshuva of trying to figure out Nisuin. So Yavni, kick us off. This is the great Maran Rav Ovadia Yosef. Go for it.
נראה שבראש ובראשונה עלינו לבאר מהות החופה הקובעת את הנישואין. כי בוודאי שאין 7 ימי המשתה מתחילים אלא מן החופה והלאה, שהרי קודם לכן אין כאן אלא אירוסין בלבד. ונודע כי יש בזה מחלוקת הראשונים, ותלי באשלי רב רבי. What does that mean? Vatale ba'ashlei Rav Rave?
Yeah, Ashley Rav Rave literally means what's an eshel? What kind of tree is it? Whatever it is, but the great trees. But it means the great chachamim. It's a phrase from the Gemara. Yeah. So.
Okay. I see. The great chachamim. Okay, fine. וזה לשון הרמב"ם בראש פרק י' מהלכות אישות, הלכה א', הארוסה אסורה לבעלה מדברי סופרים כל זמן שהיא בבית אביה וכולי. ואפילו אם קידשה בביאה, אסור לו לבוא עליה ביאה שנייה בבית אביה, עד שיביא אותה לתוך ביתו ויתייחד עמה ויפרישנה לו, וייחוד זה הנקרא כניסה לחופה, והוא הנקרא נישואין בכל מקום. וכלשון זה פסק. Do you want me to be translating this, or is it?
I just want to highlight this, right? We've seen this. The Rambam is as a reminder. He sees 3 things as essentially being equal, but I'm not going to claim it completely, right? Chuppah is yichud, right? Which is nisuin, right? But it has to be a particular kind of yichud, right? He does say, right? It has to be yichud in his house, right? It has to be in his beveito. Right. And it's Yefrishena lo. So it seems to me that he has to, this has to be, not just like she happens in his house, potentially we will see this, but that he actually, this is the yichud he is doing for the sake of nisuin kind of thing. So, okay, great.
וכלשון זה פסק מרן בשולחן ערוך, אבן העזר סימן מ"ה, עוד כתב הרמב"ם, כיוון שנכנסה ארוסה לחופה, הרי זו מותרת לבוא עליה, והרי היא אשתו גמורה לכל דבר, ומי שתיכנס לחופה נקראת נשואה, אף על פי שלא נבעלה, והוא שתהא ראויה לבעילה, אבל אם הייתה נידה, אף על פי שנכנסה לחופה ונתייחד עמה, לא גמרו הנישואין, והרי היא כארוסה עדיין. Something interesting, and I was thinking about this, is that it says Vinit Yachedim, like even if she's a nida, even if he does yichud, which I thought we've said is asur in that context, but maybe not.
To do yichud with the nida that with the nida who you are not married to is asur to do yichud, but if you did it, but the avad, it doesn't do anything. According to him,
it doesn't do anything. Okay.
The Ran is going to say something different, but yeah. So
הוא,
do you mind if I just throw
yeah,
one thing in here? I think I
no,
don't know what to do with this quite, but I think it's interesting that, right, Kiddushin, even if you really play at the Rambam, where he thinks the only Kiddushin that, well, it's not so clear what shtar is, but that Kiddushay Bia is the only one that's deoraita. Let's pretend that for the moment, right? Like it seems to be like originally Kiddushin was, or Erosin was, it was all about Bia, and then we added in these other categories, whether the Torah itself or the Chachamim added in these other categories of Kesef and Shtar, and moved us, and then said Bia is Asur, moved us away from that. And the same thing actually we're seeing in some ways here is, even though Bia may be even a way to affect Nisuin, right? We're moving away from that and saying, it just needs to be Yichud that's Ra'uyah, that Ra'ui Levia, and not actually Bia itself. There seems to be a push of using Bia in the Chachamim, a push away from using Bia as a way to affect a change. That seems to be maybe something that's uncomfortable there, which I think we can understand why that might be. Yeah. All right, just want to point that out. So
yeah.
Okay.
Kulushon ze pasak. Oh, yeah. Yeah, should I keep going?
Yeah, go for it.
Or do you want to take over?
I'll take over. You
Break
want
it
to
up.
read a little bit. Yeah, okay. So Uchashon hazeh pasak maran b'stam b'shulchan aruch. So that's right. That's actually the beginning of it's Sif Aleph right there in the Shulchan Aruch, and without saying Yesh Omrim or anything like that. That's the way the Shulchan Aruch puts it. Od katav harambam. So the rule of the Rambam that chuppah is yichud, and yichud that's ra'ui levia. That's the way the Maran, that's right, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, and that's based on the Rambam. Od katav Rambam shalotina senida ad shetitaher, right? So you shouldn't, marry a woman who's in nida until she becomes she goes into the mikveh after her period of clean days. So v'chakatav Maran a Shulchan Aruch. V'zeh halashon kasher hadavar shelo tinaseh ad shetitar. Right. The Shulchan Aruch says it's a good thing. It's a very proper thing to do, that you shouldn't marry until she becomes tehora. Uv'shut tamim deim katav b'zeh halashon katav Rabbeinu Yosef Halevi Evan Migash b'shem harav Yitzchak Evan Maron Zal. Shanida in really kenes lechupa ve'ein merachim berchat chatanim ad titar she'ein chupa ela yichud chatan ve'kala l'shem nisuin. All right, so we have this. These are, I think, mainly Sephardi poskim, right? But that you can't, the nida can't come to the chupa, and you shouldn't do the brachot until she becomes tahora, because chupa is yichud, right? This is very, by the way, typical. One of the reasons I want to do this too, typical Rav Ovadia Yosef, where he's going to start listing sources that fall into the different, like what other sources fall into this camp, what sources fall into this camp. This is he is partially because he's just an encyclopedia himself, a little bit, and I think that's one of the main things he likes to do, is like just kind of weigh the sides in some ways. So when you have this kind of access, okay. V'chakatav Rabbeinu Hai Gaon b'shut Hagonim she'asur lasot chupa l'nida l'varech aleh sheva brachot ho'il ve'ein la yichud. All right, so this goes all the way back to the Gaonim, that chupa nida doesn't work, because, which is, this is the whole thing that's intimately tied up with the question of, is chupa just yichud or not, and we saw that in the run. All right, he's going to bring the run a little bit. Chakatav Rabbeinu Yitzchak bar Ruven v'ilba barchot chayim chalek bet ayen sham. All right, I'll go through the Laman Mikol Zeh, Laman Mikol Zeh, Shechupa Hia Yichud Shemitjached Ima Beveito. Right, that's as obvious from the Rambam. Right, it's not just any Yichud. It can't just be that the bride and groom come to Yavni's house and have Yichud. It has to be, he has to have some ownership over it. V'chein muchach lehedya midivrei haravad be'asagot ayen sham. Okay, and the Ravad agrees with it. He makes that very explicit, actually, in his hasagot. All right. Should I send it back to you, or should I keep going?
Either way. Ulamaran, yeah, sure.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. So.
Okay. Ulamaran כתב, הגיע הזמן ופרסה נידה, אינו מעלה למזונות, איכא דיאליף מהכה דחופה היינו ייחוד. ולפיכך, כשפרסה נידה ולא בעל, שאסורה להתייחד עמו, לאו בת חופה היא. ומשום הכי אינו מעלה לה מזונות. וכן דעת הרמב"ם בפרק י' מהלכות אישות, ואחרים אומרים דחופה לאו היינו ייחוד. ואחרים אומרים דחופה לאו היינו ייחוד.
Yeah, you gotta read that sentence differently.
Yeah. ושני הכא דכיוון שאין חופה זו מסורה לביאה, לא חייבוהו לכונסה וכולי, ולפי שאנו נוהגים עכשיו, so that's עד כאן הר"ן. No, this is
still a run. Yeah, still a run.
still הר"ן. ולפי שאנו נוהגים עכשיו לעשות חופה בלא ייחוד, אין אנו מקפידים אם היא נידה, אם לאו. ומכל מקום, כאשר הדבר שלא תיכנס לחופה עד שתטהר. עד כאן. הוא מבואר שדרך הר"ן, שדברי הר"ן, שדברי הר"ן נוטה להאומרים שהחופה אינה ייחוד, אלא הכילה שעושים מעל אלא הקהילה שעושים מעל לחתן קהילה?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I was right, okay. אלא הקהילה שעושים מעל לחתן והכלה בעת ברכת חתנים. ובספר העיטור.
I want to stop you there. We actually had this discussion in class. I don't know if you remember, of does the Ron preference one way or another? When he says V'anu noagim, right? Is that his preference?
Right.
And Rav Ovadia Yosef clearly seems to think that is his preference, right? That the Ron thinks that chuppah is not yichud. Chuppah is this covering essentially over the Chatan and Kala at the time of the Birkat Chatanim, and therefore even though you shouldn't, he said, do Chupat Nida, it works. It's Mahane at the end of the day, and that whole sugi at the beginning of Ketubot, which we looked at last week for chazarah, which is, says that he doesn't have to give her mezonot if she's pirsa nida after the year expires between erosin and nisuin. Right. Is that's not because you can't have chupat nida. It's just because we're not obligating, the Chachamim didn't obligate him to have it in that case.
Right.
Okay.
So I think is it a year between Erusin and Nisuin, or a year between like sometime after Erusin when one of them says, all right, it's time?
Yeah, you're right. The strict mission is Kishita Tiva, right? Isn't it? That's what it says when she makes the claim. So it's a great question. I don't know enough. Partially because these aren't things I've studied much because they're not things that we apply so much today. But yeah, you might be right. It might be a year after she makes a claim against, like, okay, we did Erosin 3 years ago. Now it's time. And then the clock starts. So, okay. We're at the Sefer.
Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to take over?
Yeah, I'll take over. Sure.
Yeah, we're at the Sefer HaYitur. Yeah.
The Sefer HaYitur. All right. Katav v'zel l'shono v'chupa hi shemosra ha'av u'machnisa levala levait sheyesh bo chidush kegon ela hasadinim shesvivot haktalim. All right. ויש שעושים סוכה בוורד והדס, כפי המנהג, ומתייחדים בה שניהם, והיא נקראת Talmo Veloz. I don't know Talmo, I don't know what that is. But obviously it's a sukkah that has Vradim and Hadassim in it. But
exactly what it is.
Yeah. Okay, so there's so the tourist has this custom that really it's bringing the father, kind of handing her over to the Baal, right, into a place where they make something new I think I'm adding words here now for this part, like representative of a new home for them, right? It's their home now, and not just and so it could be like a special sukkah in the house that has special flowers and plants and so forth, or it could be or special sheets that they put out, new wallpaper. I think really that's one way, you can almost look, they re-wallpaper the place, and then it counts, kind of idea of wallpaper is coming back, apparently. I found that out, so it's that look is appropriate, but so
The just married sign in the back of the car, does that
Exactly.
work?
Actually, yeah, it's actually funny. Like, I wonder if that is like, if it's a car and then you added something to the car, the car that he owned. It doesn't have to be he owns it, right?
Right.
A place. So it's just a car and you add something to the car to make it new for them. All right. But Ve'omer shechupa hi sudar shechofim al rashehem b'shat habrachot, right? Love miltahi, but the Eitur says that's nothing, right? This idea that the chuppah is this handkerchief that we put over their heads at the time of the bracha. I really do wonder where that comes from. But midigar sinan uleachtu b'chuppah because we have a thing in Sukkot that they need to be in yichud together in the chuppah, and they need to eat in the sukkah, right? And in simcha ela b'chuppah, all right. And therefore, it sounds like it needs to be a place that it's actually like they can have yichud in, and not just like a couple people hold up a handkerchief. All right. And I think this is the Yerushalmi here, but Yerushalmi. Lo sof davar lechupa ela levait sheyesh bo chupa. All right. Shmamina shu makom miyuchad ke'in kila shoshvim beinehem hashoshavim vehem hanisuim. All right. So here in the Yerushalmi, we go back to the kila idea, that right, it's a special place, but it's not a place of yichud, right? Necessarily. It's rather a place where they can, that's a designated place, and the wedding, the shoshvinim sit there with them, and that's nisuin. So, good. Should I keep going?
Whatever you want.
Yeah, I'll do one more. I'll do a little more. Yerushalmi, Elohen chupat chatanim, sadinin, hametziarim, v'saharoni zahav tulim bahem. I don't actually know what saharoni are, but but in the Yerushalmi that we say this is what a chuppah of the bridegroom is these embroidered, maybe like tapestries, almost like sheets, I think something like that, right? And there's some gold of something, I don't know, hanging from them. Do you know what saharon is?
No, I don't. Yeah, no, I don't.
I'll leave it to anybody who watches this to maybe tell me. Maybe I'll look it up after. Right? And even though we only do this right for a betula, we also do it for an almana, right?
Right. I think it's not saying we also do this. I think it's balmananami kevan shenichnaσα l'shem.
Oh, you're right. You are right. Kevan shenichnaσα l'shem nisuin v'yesh bo makom miyuchad v'atzat hamita lichached shnehem harei ze kevait sheyesh bo chuppah. Right. So okay, this is, even though this is only for the betula, right? The almanah,
all these decorations and
exactly. Yeah, this is kind of canopy. That's the word I'm looking for. This nice little it's almost like a gazebo that you put in the house somewhere, right? It's the almanah, we also have it because she comes in for the sake of nisuin, and there's a special place, right, with a made bed, for the two of them, designated for the two of them. That's like a bait that has a chuppah, same thing. So it's like a special, it's like you build up a structure or a place, or you make a place up for the chatan and kala. That's chuppah, according to the Eitur here. Adkan, I'm not sure what, Adkan something. It could be Adkan Churat Deshen, but that wouldn't make sense. So I'm not sure. Yeah. But okay. Take over with the Sefer HaManhig.
Okay. Sefer HaManhig. Do you know who that is? What that is?
I don't. So.
וחופה נקראת על שם שחופה אותה בטליתו. כדאית בקידושין, כיוון שפירס טליתו עליה לשם נישואין וכולי. והמקרא מעיד ופרסת כנפיך על אמתך, כי גואלתה. ועל כן מנהג צרפת ופרובנצה לתת מיטה צבועה על ראש שניהם. מיטה צבועה על ראש שניהם, זכר לפריסת הכנף, שפורס כנף בגדו עליה עד כאן.
Yeah, it's kind of
Wait, so the fact that there's I don't think we saw that Gemara, but the fact that there's an explicit Gemara that says Kevan sheperes talito alea l'shem nisuin is like,
yeah, it seems to be pretty good proof.
I'm intrigued by that no one else has seen fit to mention that.
I mean, I think one of the things we're seeing here is that there's a lot of different places where there's like these kind of offhanded remarks by the Gemara about this kind of stuff, and it's never very explicit, as to what it actually is, which is a problem, and that's what we're dealing with. And so, yeah, there is this Gemara apparently. I didn't look it up, but which just says this. So, and we have the pasuk in Ruth that he's quoting here, which is a pretty powerful pasuk. Right. It's so
yeah.
All right.
ובאורחות חיים חלק ב' וחופה הוא שחופפין אותן בטלית או סודר וכיוצא בזה, וכמו שכתבנו לגבי ייעוד כיוון שפירס טליתו עליה. עד כאן. וכך כתב אריה. I didn't quite understand what that last part was. לגבי ייעוד.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I guess that's that same quote. We have to see what the context is.
Yeah.
In Kiddushin. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to take a look, but yeah. Yeah, no, good. Yeah, so this is it's just another source though that he's got, which is like, I hofef, here would be like you hover the talit over them, so it's a similar idea.
Right.
Okay. And remember, part of remembering that Rav Ovadia Yosef's one of his methodologies again is to list sources on each side, right? He's not, like a lot of poskim that I've read, they won't. Sometimes they'll write like, so and so wrote this, and they'll give like an analysis of what they said, and say, and yeah, there are others, or here are the others, and sometimes they won't even say that, But for him, like giving everybody is very important. So yeah, right. It's
וכך כתב אריאז בפרקם הכתובות. וכך כתב הרדה עין שם. ובמרדכי שהכנסת חופה עושים קודם לקידושין, כי הכנסת חופה היא שמוסרה לחתן בשחרית קודם הברכה, לפיכך אומרים מקדש עמו ישראל על ידי חופה וקידושין.
מקדש עמו ישראל.
שם.
So.
Sorry, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. We saw like it's sort of counterintuitive. So we had a couple of different reasons why it should be chuppah v'kiddushin, and then the Mordechai comes and says, well, actually, the way we practice it, we actually do chuppah before kiddushin.
Exactly. And here it's very simple. It's like they give her over to the chatan, right? That's all it is. It's you hand her over. Right. That's nisuin. So, but that's chuppah, which maybe is nisuin. So yeah. So
yeah. ומדברי הראש מוכח דסבירה לי דחופה אינה ייחוד עיין שם ויש לדחות. Meaning like maybe that's not it seems like it's חופה אינה ייחוד by the Rosh, but it's not so clear. Maybe we could just
I think so. Yeah, that's my guess. I'm saying about the Rosh there.
והרמה בהגה כתב על דברי מרן השולחן ערוך שפסק דחופה היינו ייחוד כנ"ל, ויש אומרים דחופה אינה ייחוד אלא כל שהביאה החתן לביתו לשם נישואין, ויש אומרים שהחופה היא שפורסים סודר על ראשם בשעת הברכה, ויש אומרים שחופת בתולה מי שיצא בהינומה, ואלמנה מי שנתייחדו, תוספות יומא. והמנהג פשוט עכשיו, לקרות חופה מקום שמכניסים יריעה פרוסה על גב פרוצאות, ומכניסים תחתיה החתן והכלה ברבים, ומקדשה שם ומברכים שם ברכת אירוסין ונישואין. ואחר כך מריחים אותם לביתם ואוכלים ביחד במקום צנוע. וזה החופה שנוהגת עכשיו. עד כאן. Sounds like he's describing that whole process as being a chuppah.
It's great. I think the Ramah might be a process, right? It's like the chuppah isn't a moment. It's like you have to go through these steps, and at the end of it, it always reminds me. if you ever read The Winds of War by Herman Wouk, I don't know if you've ever read it, and two characters, Byron and Natalie, get married, and where are they? One of the neutral countries. I can't remember where it is right now. And they're like signing all these documents, and you know, and then they're done. The guy says congratulations, and they're like, well, when did we get married in there? You know, and it was like, I think it was, you know, a few documents back. You know, it's like, is there actually a point, or is it like you just have to go through like a process of signing a bunch of stuff and you're done? You know, same thing here. It's like you go through a bunch of things, and for him, it's, you know, that you have these poles, and on top of the poles is a sheet of some sort, and people, they go under the sheet, and then they do kiddushin under there, which clearly isn't what it was in the Gemara, right? Because they didn't do kiddushin at the same time, and then they're kind of, you know, carted off. You know, it has to be beragim, which is like really fascinating, right? And then they, you know, they do all the brachot, and then they bring them to their house. And then they have to have a meal together in a tsanua place. It doesn't have to be yichud, right? Just a, you know, a place that maybe gives them some privacy, maybe, you know, that they could talk to each other a little bit. It's really interesting, you know. And this, I think, just something I want to bring up, that Rav Nachum said that really struck me. And he said, you know, marriage is not just, you know, he was talking about, you know, the fact that you can't get married, potentially can't get married in nidah, because not that marriage is only about sex, but sex is one of many aspects of what marriage is, you know, and that each of these must, you know, has to reflect, you know, the ability to fulfill all those aspects. And in some ways, chuppah is that, you know, it's like them being able to eat together, and the community recognizing them, and, you know, the community kind of leading them off together, and there's like a whole bunch of stuff of like representing the marriage itself, I think, going on there potentially. Yeah. And that's why maybe several steps are needed, not just one thing that defines it. That's my guess about what's behind this. So which also, by the way, it could mean, I don't, this might be a little bit harif to say, but it could mean that chuppah isn't something that you can pin down. It could be something that it's like, it depends on the time and the place as to how people, you know, what do people do in that time and place to make somebody, you know, designated as married, as opposed to kiddushin, which actually does require a particular, you know, universal set of actions. So, okay. So maybe I'll take over. Vayen bebeit Joseph, uvach, v'shar melach, and so forth. Uvivirei gra. The gra is really. Did you guys do the gra in class yesterday?
I don't remember. No, I don't.
The gra, if I remember correctly, is a really interesting thing about like their custom of that essentially in the Beit Knesset, the Chatan like rents out like a place of, or takes a portion in it, and they
we did it.
Yeah. So. V'nei mitzad sfara nireh barur she'ein shivat shemei mishteh marchilim elamin hachupa v'hala ki lifnei hachupa af al pi shebrachu kvar sheva brachot adayin hi ke'arusa lechol davar. All right, kenireh li. All right, I think this is when he gets into the rest. Well, let's see how it goes. All right. But one of the things, well, I think I remember why I kept this, right? He says, you know, even though you did Sheva Brachot already, you haven't changed your status, right? This is something we saw also in the sources of, this was a kind of a dismissed Havamina of, don't think that you have to, you know, if he's living in his father-in-law's house, that we need to do Sheva Brachot, that's because that does Nisuin, right? Sheva Brachot isn't Nisuin, it's necessary for Nisuin. Big debate, right, of course, between whether or not you actually need it, and Nisuin is not effective without Sheva Brachot, or Kalav Velo Bracha, right? Idea or whether or not it's just that ideally you should do it beforehand, but if you didn't, you can do it afterwards. You know, it's just Sheva. Okay. But v'chaktav mara meshuvot bet Joseph leven ha'ezer v'chaktav b'shuvot perach matea Aaron ayen sham v'shimat yimei mishtet tluim b'nisuim shenasim al yedei chuppah. All right, so in order to have the 7 days of feasting, that you have to know when the chuppah is. V'chaktav ataz even ha'ezer d'mashakatav Rabbi Yercham she'chatan she'olech im kalato le'ir acheret miyad achar sheva brachot. V'nishtuhu b'derech zman merubeh oseh chuppah be'ir sheba l'sham v'noheg shivat yemei mishteh v'nikra birkat chatanim beveit chatanim. All right, so this is actually, maybe we might get to this case later, but Rabbi Ben Yerucham talks about the case, right, that the chatan and kala, they go to right after Sheva Brachot, they go to a different city, right? This is right. They have the celebration in city A, and then maybe her family lives in a different city, or his family, and they, other relatives, they go to next city. All right. And they're on the road for a while, right? So the place they're going, they make a chuppah. They have 7 days of feasting, right? They recite the Birkat Chatanim in that house. Right. And he says, that's only dealing when they didn't do chuppah in city A, but only in city B. So rather, they have the first city, they do kiddushin, all right, then, and they do the brachot, and then they go to a different city. All right. Ayen Sham. All right. I guess, or I'm not sure where that is. Excuse me. Yeah, all right. V'imken, מכיוון שאין אנו נוהגים לאחד את החתן והכלה אלא בלילה לאחר הסעודה. היה לנו לחשוב שיבת ימי משתה מן הלילה שלאחר עריכת הקידושין ושבע ברכות, כיוון שהייחוד הוא החופה לדעת הרמב"ם בסיעתו. אולם מכל מקום נראה שלעניין ברכת חתנים שמברכים כל שבעה, אין לברך אלא עד סוף יום שלישי הבא, כי יש לחשוב את שבעת ימי המשתה לעניין זה, משען שברכו שבע ברכות בעת פריסת הטלית על ראש החתן והכלה, הואיל ולא פלטינן מפלוגתא לרבתא בפירוש מהות החופה. All right. So he says, in this case, so the question is, if they're under the talit, right, and you did Birkat Sheva Brachot, and you didn't do Yichud to that night, right, per the Rambam's thing, he said, well, even though, per the Rambam, we actually, the Yichud didn't start until that next halachic day, essentially, because it was that night, that doesn't count as day one, because there's a lot of people who think that talit counts, right, and we're not sure, so that talit is actually where we should count. All right. Right. So because therefore we should start counting it from the time we did it under the chuppah here being the canopy, and not the chuppah being when they did nisuin, according to the Rambam.
What is the end of ad sof yom shlishi?
Oh, good. Yeah. So is that he's bringing this up if they get married on Wednesday, right? The chuppah's on Wednesday, but the yichud doesn't happen till that night. That's the whole original case he's dealing with. I should have brought and so that's why he gives the actual days. That's all right. Which, by the way, is the way the Mishnah plays it out, that a wedding should happen on Yom Revi'i. That's the first Mishnah in Ketubot. So okay. Right. And so therefore he's like, because we don't want to to kick ourselves out of this debate of the rabbis, right, about what is the actual essence of a chuppah, right? Therefore we go per the more strict opinion of saying that don't do extra shava brachot, an extra day of shava brachot, right? Right? There is someone who thinks that just that talit over their heads, that's chuppah, right? Fake brachot leakel afilu neged maran, right? He says we hold that safek brachot, we're always lenient to not say the brachot. There's actually, by the way, one, I think it's the Komarno Rebbe in Shulchan Tahor, is that what his book's called on the Shulchan Aruch, where he actually says, it's the only pin I've ever seen like this, says safek brachot leakel is like, go say the brachot. It means leakel. Yeah, it's a pretty out there opinion. But nice. For everybody else, that means don't say the brachot. And he says, even, this is a really interesting thing from Rav Yosef, he says, even if it goes against the Shulchan Aruch, right? Because the Shulchan Aruch says yichud, right? And even then, we still are makil about the brachot and don't say the brachot, all right? And it's like the chida, all right, so. And he's got other shut chaim sha'al, shut ohel yitzchak.
That's the chida is quoting just for the idea of safek brachot leakel, or
even I think neged, even when it goes against the Shulchan Aruch, right? Neged Maharan.
Oh, okay.
Is that my guess here? Yeah. And he brings Sefer of Dagan Atiyah Ve'od, right? So good. How are we doing on time? Maybe there's a good stopping point. I'm thinking about it.
Sure.
Yeah. So here we get. I just thought it was a nice little summary of some of the different opinions here of the Ran.
Yeah.
And the Itur, really the Ran, the Itur, the Tosfot, and the Rambam, right, are really the main players in all of this. And Rav Ovadia Yosef's willingness, it goes further.
And everyone else.
Was that?
And everyone else.
And everybody else, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it. Well, maybe I'm just thinking. No, should we? No, we'll stop here. I'll call this good for the moment. And but yeah, he's actually good for this kind of stuff too. He's a very, in my humble opinion, he's a very good summarizer of things. It's he really gets kind of.
How do you know where to look? How do you find? Yeah.
How did I find this? I think I found this because of Bar Ilan. I think Bar Ilan does have like a list of topics, and I was just like scrolling through their Kiddushin Nisuin topiks, and I happened upon this. So I was yeah. And then I kind of started reading through it. I was like, oh yeah, this is actually really good. Because part of it was I didn't know how far you guys got, and so I'm gonna stop the recording now.